When recording with the SQL Profiler against a database with many users in, or just to have a very precise security in a test environment, you should add a service tier that you can use for recording in here. It requires adding a new Windows user, because that's how we will filter, and we will also change an application or a service tier setting on 2016 and 17 in here. I'll use 2017, but this process is basically the same for all roll-tail versions of NAV. The first step is to add a new user, and I'm using a standalone computer, but you normally would have to add this user inside the Active Directory in here. But I'll go here and add a new user, and I'll call it nav recording. And I'll give it a password down here. One thing that is important is that it don't expire, because else it will work for a while and then suddenly you actually have it's not working anymore. So I now have my new user. It will normally be done in Active Directory, this action. The next thing is to go add a new service tier, and I'll be using the nav administration tool, but you can also do this from PowerShell if you want. I'll go add a new instance, and I'll just call it recording. One of the advantages of setting up one of these service tiers is you can actually later on just change the setting and point it at a different database, so a user can easily then go and add it against the production or test environment as the need to record against that one. I want to select a specific user account, and I called it nav recording. My domain is demo here, and I'll have to put in the password in here. Notice that it always has 10 dots. It can be a little confusing when you're typing, that it don't show the number correctly in here. But I now have my new recording service here, and for now I'll just leave it alone because the database happens to be the right one, but you could always change that one. I'll come back to it in here. I'll need to do one thing more before this one will work, because this new user needs to have access to the SQL database, of course. So I'll have my SQL Server Management Studio. So the first step here is to add the new login, because it has never been logged in before. And in this case, I'm actually going to map this user directly to my nav database, and I'll make it a DB owner that is required for running a service tier in here. So my new user has now been added, and if I look under my database up here, I should see that my nav recording is down here, and I'm a member of the DB owner down here. That should now allow me to start this service tier in here. But before I do that, that's one very important thing for recording. And that's actually that by default, it will go in and reuse all the objects in here. And we really don't want that, because we want to be able to see the objects being read from the database in here. So I will go in and uncheck this, save my settings. If you use a lot of memory for your normal service tier, this service tier don't need a lot. We actually want it to read from the SQL database as much as possible. It's not going to be used for excessive processing, so you will be okay with that one. I currently have the right demo database down here, so it should all be fine. And if I now go in and start my new service tier, So it's now running. I can go and select my server. And I'll be able to pick one of my companies in here in my database, and it all works fine in here. So I now have my new service tier. It's ready for recording in here. The recording is happening with the SQL Profiler. So I will open up the SQL Profiler. And one thing that is needed in here is actually to import a template first in here. So I'll go ahead and add a template. It's in the Easy Security folder. There's one about SQL Profiler templates, and it depends on the server version. You can use 16 Management Studio, but you could use it against the 2008-02 database. Then you would need to import the 2008-02. In this case, I want to do the 2016 because both my server and my Management Studio is 2016 in here. I can go edit this template, and I will see in here there's a new Nav Easy Security one. I can put this one as a default, then I don't have to pick it in. I can also, in my templates, actually go in and add this column filter. So I don't necessarily want to filter against the database name, but what I actually want to do is filter on my user nav recording in here. By adding a wildcard before and after, it should make it tolerant for all cases and things like that one. So I just want anything that have part of my nav recording in here. And I'll save this one as a different name. So I'll save it as Nav Easy Security. And only the nav recording user in here. So I can now go and create a new trace, select the SQL Server, and as I will see in here, my column filter is automatically created in here, and I can basically run this one. So now it sits here and looks at all the things that are happening. So if I go in and edit a customer, for example, I will see that the service tier is a little slower than normal, and that's because it actually reads all the code from the database. So we can ensure that we know all objects and everything else in here. And I will just change a single address in here and go ahead and close the screen in here. So basically the trace has been running out here. I will save this one. First I will stop it, and then I will save it as a trace XML file. And I can then stop my trace in here. It's not necessarily a good idea to use the service tier for publishing because it will take some extra time in here. So it's a better idea to actually run a service tier on the normal service tier that actually using the caching of objects in here. So I will actually switch to my other one in here, and it can be a little hard to tell which one is which in here, but I will go in and create a new permission set, add my recording, and these recordings of course get quite large out here. I see I got 90 permissions in here, and of course all the data. and all the code units and everything else that was actually used for that process, including my customer list and card, of course, in here. So, but this one, having a special service tier set up like this, ensure that you do 100% precise recording in here. And of course, if I was going to restart my recording in here, I don't have to stop and start my SQL Profiler, but I have to restart my service tier in here, because else the caching have already done its work in here. And even if I uncheck the compile, restarting is required in here of the service tier. And again, of course, having a service tier that only is used for recording, it didn't matter if you restart it, because everybody else will be using the other service tier inside the actual work in the application in here. So I'll see here my session stopped, of course, and I could go here and switch to my other server again and be ready to actually do the recording in here. Basically everything I did in here, I created a new user, I added my user to the SQL database and mapped it to my database that I wanted to use for recording. Then I went and added the new service tier, adjusted the application caching, and I imported the SQL Profiler template and made the default name or login name the one that I actually was the new Windows user in here.